I would actually walk 20 blocks from one side of the city to another in order for me to participate in classes that would prepare me to become a member of this church. Every Wednesday, I would walk, starting out at 4:30 in the evening, so that I would arrive there by 6 and leaving by 8 so that I would get home. I never attended Catholic schools, but you know what? I did what I didn't realize. I was breaking a rule. I was so actually enthralled over what I was reading and that little, it wasn't the Baltimore Catechism, but it was catechesis, that I took the book to school, and during study period, I would read about the Catholic Church. Father Gregory, who was a Josephite, actually visited my parents, and he wanted to make sure that they understood that I wanted to be baptized. Both parents were very much in support of it. And needless to say, I actually was getting ready to be baptized, and for whatever reason, I put it off until I met my husband, then my boyfriend, and we were going to go to the movie. And he informed me that because he was in the military, he had duty, which meant he had to work, and he would miss mass. So we had to go to the movie before, we had to go to mass before the movie. I didn't know what to make of that. I had never heard anything like that, but I wanted to hang around just to see if he, of course, was real. And the rest is history. He asked me to marry him, and 3 weeks before our marriage, I became Catholic. And we have been involved in the Catholic faith, living our faith, living our stewardship for 49 years. Both of us love ministry. The thing is, neither one of us can claim ownership like the people that I will be talking to you about today. These people are pillars and cornerstones of the Black Catholic experience, who played a role actually laying the foundation for those who would come after. So I just want to tell you exactly what you can expect from me today. We're going to be talking about walking in our shoes, meaning our African Americans Catholic shoes. But so I want to spend a few minutes talking about that. And then many of you have heard about Steve Crump, who graduated from Trinity High School, who actually has done a marvelous job, very insightful job of documenting the story of Black Catholics in the Holy Land. We're going to look at a little bit of that, and then follow up by talking about the uncomfortable truths that we live today as we walk in the shoes of African Americans, particularly in light of what's going on. And then we will close out, as I saw earlier, with a period for questions. And I have a tool that I want to make sure that you have in your hands, and close with a prayer. So, shall we get started? Kentucky, you know, when Steve Crump came to me many years ago, he told me of his vision of weaving the story of his experience and experience of his mother and father and grandparents with the Catholics of today. And right away, I was hooked, because I knew very little about the Kentucky story. I didn't know exactly what the experiences were. But one thing I knew, that the history of the early Catholic Church in Kentucky was that of enslaved men and women who adopted the faith of their captors. When pioneers came to, pioneer Catholics arrived from Maryland, beginning in 18th centuries in search of religious freedom, they brought their enslaved property with them. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's difficult for me to get my head around this concept of good Christian people owning human beings as if they were livestock. But the reality is, this is exactly what they were. They were livestock. Perhaps in some situations, they were looked upon as being lower than the livestock. Although I do not have Kentucky roots, I have a story that is linked to so many descendants of enslaved Catholics. And today, on this very day, an hour ago, we buried the oldest member in my family. They laid her to rest in North Carolina, and she was 104 years old. But 5 years ago, she was able to tell us about our great grandmother who lived to be 99 years old. I'm sorry, she was able to tell us about her great grandmother who lived to be 99 years old and who was enslaved. Her great grandmother would have been my great great grandmother. She died long before I was thought of, I'm sure. But what was interesting about her story is that her journey actually started as an enslaved person when she was a baby. But when she was 12 years old, she was sold 4 times in one day. And her husband, who would have been my great great granddaddy, was 15. And he was sold 5 times on the 4th of July. Hence the reason why we do not celebrate this festive holiday today. We had to learn how to walk in their shoes through their stories from other family members. Now, God has blessed us with 3 grandchildren, 2 13-year-olds, God help us, that we're raising, and a 24-year-old. And the young siblings have not made the connection of those whose shoulders they now stand. While our 24-year-old registered nurse oftentimes offer her analysis of what then and what's taking place now in 2021. She states that very little has changed since the stories of old, that our society rubber stamped its approval of enslavement, and we bear the psychological scars that impacts our society today. In her words, she oftentimes would say, I can't see how anyone can justify what took place. How can anyone walk in the shoes of another individual who were kidnapped and stolen away, never to be seen by their family, never to be held in the arms of their parents? How can we ignore today the signs that are so visible? She always managed to conclude after these lengthy conversations, God is going to hold someone accountable for this. It is true, as I've said to her, The God that we serve is the God of all people. The God that we serve, God loves all and is in all. And we are called to help others to understand that they must love us and we must love them. Oftentimes, when estates were settled, enslaved people would be given to the religious order, or when a young woman entered the convent or a young man joined religious order, an enslaved person would be given as a part of the dowry. A document written by Bishop Spalding to the Vatican called The Dissertation of the American Civil War from the Border States of Kentucky, and the soon-to-be Archbishop expressed concern that emancipated slaves were at risk of becoming drunks and thieves. That's an interesting perspective. You know, you can't debate the truth in scenarios such as these. Quotes are what they are. Facts are what they are. Statistics are what they are. Brickwork, masonry, cornerstones are what they are. You cannot sugarcoat this reality. First, places of worship in what we now call Kentucky Holy Lands, Nelson County, Washington County, and Marion counties were built by the hands of enslaved people with skills as masons and carpenters. Understanding what they did and how they lived and the sacrifices they made means wearing uncomfortable shoes. As the uncomfortable truth is shared, connecting bluegrass roots and the Kentucky realities. As previously stated, the enslaved people helped to construct a number of the first places of worship for the Diocese of Louisville. We have St. Charles and St. Mary's, Kentucky. We have St. Augustine in Lebanon, Kentucky. We have St. Thomas in Bardstown, Kentucky. We have the Basilica of St. Joseph's Proto Cathedral in Bardstown. And we have two prominent buildings right here on the campus of the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, St. Vincent's de Paul Church and O'Connell Hall. Interesting enough, I've been in and out of there many times. And actually, I never knew that until maybe 15 years ago. But I must say that the Sisters of Charities, actually, they've been in the forefront of righting the wrong. They've been in the forefront of correcting the stories. But can you imagine how difficult it must have been to build a place of worship when you were unable to fully participate because you were enslaved? Can you imagine? But that did not prevent them from living their faith. How do we know? Because a large number of the 20,000 that Steve Crump talks about in his documentary are cradle Catholics. And their roots are deep in the soil of central Kentucky. Their contributions came at a very heavy cost. And even today, in some circles, their contributions go unnoticed. Steve Crump once stated while attending one of our African American Catholics Leadership Awards dinner, I listened to Archbishop Joseph E. Kurtz say, "The church has no room for racism." That resonated with him and would be in the forefront of his journey as he walked in the shoes of many Black Catholics who lived in the Holy Lands and whose shoulders he would now stand as he would write the story of the uncomfortable truths. But before there was a Steve Crump, and before there was a Father Cyprian Davis, there was a man by the name of Nathaniel Green, who was the author of The Silent Believers. He laid the foundation for the work of Father Cyprian Davis and of Steve Crump. Silent Believers would give a voice to those who seem to have no voice. And I must say, I was introduced to the silent believer or silent believers from a person who was very instrumental in our journey as my husband and I entered the diaconate, Sister Liz Wendelin. It would be Sister Liz Wendelin, a sister of charities, who provided my office, then it was Office of Black Catholics, with the last shipment of Mr. Green's book. Sister Liz understood that the history needed to be shared in the Black community. I have never publicly expressed my gratitude for her commitment to the African American community and to my family. Had it not been for what we used to call the 17 Street Sisters, which of course included Sister Kathleen Sheehan, Sister Edna, Sister Barbara Flores, Sister Dorothy Jackson, Sister Susan, and Sister Pat Haley, who took care of our 2-year-old and 3-year-old, it is possible that my husband and I would never have completed the diaconal program. So thank you. Thank you for dreaming with us. Thank you for listening to us. And by all means, thank you for being our extended family. Mr. Green's work made it possible for some sense of ownership among parts of African American Catholics and their faith. The seeds that he planted would not fully take roots until Father Cyprian Davis wrote his book. It would be then that the history of Black Catholics would solidify all of the prior work done by Mr. Green. Many Catholics from the rural communities embrace the mindset that I am here in this church today and I will remain because my ancestors were Catholic and because my ancestors paid the price. Because of their spirit, I will continue living my faith, and I want to pass my faith on to my children, and my children will pass it on to their children. It is important to embrace who you are and your history, even if the church doesn't fully embrace you. So at this point, I want to have us spend a few minutes, give and take 20 minutes of looking at the the uncomfortable, facing the uncomfortable truths. I'm hoping that Trent can get that started for us.
Is it the resource that you sent me that you'd like me to pull up?
No, it's the actually it's the video. It's the DVD I wrote you about.
Oh,
You
I
didn't get
actually
that?
don't think I have that. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. Trent, if you don't mind, because I can't share it from here. If you would go to
I can, if I make you the host, would you be able to share it?
It would be a little bit difficult.
Okay.
I'm on two monitors here.
Sure.
I could go ahead and talk through it, but I was going to say it can be pulled out actually from Google or YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Facing the Uncomfortable Truths by Stephen Crump.
Facing the Uncomfortable Truth. Let me pull that right up.
I'll keep talking until you get it. I would say that a number of young people have not made the connection, and so far as their faith history of their ancestors and their history of today. They're more easier to walk away on a sabbatical, as they oftentimes will tell me, but they always find a way back home. They always come back because of baptisms. They come back for celebratory events, and they come back for homecomings. The experience of Black Catholics, or the experience of many Black Catholics, actually laced in a liberation theology. They truly believe in everything, believe that within themselves, that God is in full control. And with that, I shall be quiet so that we can hear Steve's words. That's Mr. Bill Hartman. Okay. Am I the only one? I don't hear a sound.
One second.
Okay.
I'll try again.
Previous generations of disenfranchised Roman Catholics forged a deep footprint.
They were like martyrs without shedding their blood.
Unsung martyrs who built many of Kentucky's 19th century places of worship. Their contributions came with a very heavy cost.
Bishop Joseph Rosati of St. Louis owned slaves. Bishop John Mary Oden of Texas owned slaves.
As did Kentucky's earliest bishops who participated in bartering and owning human lives. Their names appear on prominent statues and grace the entrance of a well-known high school that had to shut its doors.
What a tradition, what a fabulous history that school has.
Rural traditions found their way into the state's biggest urban center.
African Americans who were on Catholic plantations, they wanted the same thing, and Louisville was kind of like the place to go if you could get there.
Many of the faithful did not flee their belief system.
They had to have a strong faith to endure what they did.
Endurance was perhaps inspired by a 19th century newspaperman decades ahead of his time.
He spoke out when transportation did not include fairly people of color.
Daniel Rudd's vision from the 1800s has its place in the 21st century considering that sacrifices came generations before.
For Black Catholics, it was just pay, pray, and obey.
Sacraments are an important part of this ritual, but along the way, there are things that seem to be forgotten. Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Krupp. This is a story of history, heritage, and hardship. Going back to the late 1700s, the earliest settlers in the Commonwealth of Kentucky expanded the reach of the Roman Catholic Church. They carried their faith into parts of the South as well as America's heartland. However, the contributions of one group appears to be missing. We're talking about African Americans. They were builders and caretakers, parishioners and worshipers. Understanding what they did, how they lived, and the sacrifices they made means coming to grips with facing an uncomfortable truth by connecting bluegrass roots and Catholic realities. Bardstown, Kentucky, population just a little more than 13,000. Overflowing pride comes from deep connections linked to centuries of distilling high-quality bourbon. Much in-demand whiskey exported from the seat of Nelson County gives this community the title of being known as the undisputed bourbon capital of the world. However, another hometown fact boldly shapes the narrative of American religious history. Bardstown is also home to a significant and revered place of worship. The Basilica of St. Joseph's is America's first Catholic cathedral west of the Alleghenies. Built back in the 19th century, this revered structure remains a noted place of worship in the center of town that's held in very high esteem. Blocks away, one signature event with ties to the church has been carried out for more than 2 decades. Linked by faith, family, and a full weekend of festivities, this popular seasonal event known as Buttermilk Days attracts the masses. It starts with a morning breakfast and before the night is over, a big street festival keeps the sidewalks packed and people on their feet.
They always come back to the roots.
Blocks from the cathedral, the roots of this annual gathering are firmly connected to St. Monica's Catholic Church. Well into her 80s, Carrie Stivers remembers the formative years of the new doors being opened at St. Monica's, which is named after a black patron saint, as a means of giving African American Catholics a parish they could call their own.
You wanted to be active. You wanted to be more than just the cooks that helped with the picnics. You wanted to have to make the decisions and what was going on. And so that was in the minds of some of our forefathers.
History has a way of telling its own story.
Such a compelling narrative and definitive story chronicled by Nathaniel Green is titled The Silent Believers. First released in the early 1970s, Green's account spells out the challenges and obstacles endured by Catholics of color in the Bluegrass State.
Catholics, like the other religions, fell into this lull of supporting slavery and segregation. The church was trying to survive in the religious environment that they found themselves in Kentucky.
In the state's central region known as Kentucky's Holy Land, which is made up of Nelson, Washington, and Marion counties, houses of worship and final resting places offer a compelling timeline.
I feel like that I'm here because of my ancestors, because of their spirit, and I want to continue that. And I want to pass that on to my children so that they can understand that, it's important to embrace who you are and your history.
Go forth.
The formative years of this faith in the Bluegrass State are connected to the trail of history emerging from Maryland's largest city during the 18th and 19th centuries.
Baltimore historically was the first diocese established in the U.S. But that's not to say it was the oldest in the New World.
The first group of persons that call themselves Catholics that came to this country, what we now call the United States, they landed in Maryland on March 24th, 1634.
Steeped in the roots of American Catholicism, Baltimore is home to the nation's first Roman Catholic cathedral, where construction began in 1806. Officially known as the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, builders finished their work in 1821.
In 1808, the Catholic Church had expanded beyond just Baltimore, and so they decided to come up with 4 new dioceses, 4 new hubs of Catholicism, and they were New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Bardstown, Kentucky.
In one of his academic writings titled Catholic Slaves and Slaveholders in Kentucky, Dr. C. Walker Goller of Xavier University of Cincinnati writes, during late March of 1787, a band of warriors on 18 Mile Island just above the falls of the Ohio fired upon a flatboat of Maryland Catholics. An ounce ball ripped through both thighs of Thomas Hill, while another bullet took the life of Hill's property, a black man. His name was not recorded.
Bardstown by far had more Catholics and covered way more land. It basically was all the known United States west of the Allegheny Mountains was in the Bardstown Diocese. And Bishop Benedict Joseph Flagey was put in charge of all that.
Bishop Benedict Joseph Flagey bears the distinction of being Kentucky's first Roman Catholic bishop.
Flagey arrived here 1810. 1811, he is passing his paper around about building cathedral and things. We're going on with the idea of Bardstown was centrally located for the local parishes.
"20 years before St. Joseph's Cathedral opened and Bishop Flagey welcomed parishioners, 11 miles south of Bardstown near the community of Loretto in Marion County, Holy Cross Church served as the primary place for growing the denomination. Founded in 1792, it is among the state's oldest places of Roman Catholic worship. While the current structure points to the fact that it was built in 1823, this memorial recognizes where the first church stood on these grounds. Charged with the responsibility of expanding the base of worshipers, Father Stephen Baden, who's been described as the Apostle of Kentucky, arrived in the so-called Holy Land during 1793. Baden was the first priest ordained in the U.S. by America's first bishop, John Carroll of Baltimore.
Many people saw that Baden had a very difficult life. I mean, he was a minister. He wanted to bring salvation to people, but he also had to have food on the table. So many Catholic women and men donated help to him in the terms of slaves. Eventually, he became an owner of slaves. At one point, he owned 10 different slaves.
The Lord be with you.
Coming to grips with the factual indignities of the faith he practices is an awakening journey for Father Anthony Chandler. This Louisville native has pastored several parishes in rural Kentucky.
And of course, we're already a little shuddered by when we hear Catholics that had slaves. Well, that's certainly a reality.
Oftentimes when estates were settled, slaves would be given to, to these religious orders.
A young man or young woman enters the convent or enters the Jesuits, and as part of their dowry, they bring a slave.
One group benefiting from free labor was the Sisters of Charity. Since 1812, they've called Nazareth, Kentucky, home.
We were a community of religious women teaching young girls, so we needed lots of help.
There were slaves, and the sisters were trying to get ahead, and our people were manpower.
We have 2 buildings that they helped build. The bricks were handmade from clay here on the property, and one of them is our beautiful church, and the other one is O'Connor Hall.
I think it speaks more to the mentality of the white slave owners, and in this case, the nuns and the priests, than it does African Americans.
Tributaries like the Rolling Fork River, Cartwright's Creek, and Pottinger's Creek are among the earliest settlements for pioneering members of the faithful and their so-called property from Maryland.
It was defined what we were going to offer as far as white people were concerned. As far as people who were in authority was concerned, that was what we were going to offer was defined, and that meant bricks and mortar.
While dated reminders hint at labor and laborers at these historic structures, coming to grips with the past opens a torrent of scattered emotions.
You know, I had, some inkling that, slaves probably built, these churches.
My people helped build those churches, were a part of those churches, went to mass there, said prayers there, baptized there.
Most notably, Bardstown's famous Basilica of St. Joseph's.
One of the gentlemen who was a brickmaker, he had promised for his servant, he and his servant would make the bricks and would have them available.
You had skilled African American enslaved people that were skilled masons, carpenters, house builders.
If you look at it in that context, it makes those buildings even more sacred as places of worship, because there is that blood, sweat, and in many cases tears that is what led to those edifices existing today.
During the years this faith expanded in Kentucky and elsewhere, something unique was happening back in Baltimore. Women of color answered the spiritual call to serve in an organized fashion.
Here you have something that's just almost unthinkable, that you would have a religious order, women of color in the habit when they're living in a slave state. And the mindset of many people is that, that black people may not even have souls.
First organized in Maryland during 1829, the Sisters of Providence, also known as the Oblate Nuns, are still a functioning order. Its founding leader was a Haitian immigrant by the name of Mother Mary Lang.
She was a free woman in a slave state. She was a woman in a male-dominated society. She was an immigrant woman in a nativist country, and she was a Catholic woman in a Protestant country. So you have 4 strikes against you.
Our mission is to be of service to God's people.
More than a century and a half later, the order remains viable, and for several years was headed up by Superior General Sister Mary Alexis Fisher, who believes lasting strength comes through suffering.
We as African Americans, look at our history. Slavery. That was no picnic. And yet, we are a strong people.
Monuments across the South honor soldiers who contributed service and sacrifice during the Civil War. By the time this conflict exploded on American soil and divided the country, power shifted to a new cathedral in Louisville that opened during the 1850s. Bishop Flagey died in 1850 and was replaced by a cleric who, despite his controversial views, became one of Kentucky's best-known bishops.
Martin Spalding was a complex figure. He was born in 1810 down in the Catholic Holy Land of Kentucky, born to a slaveholding family.
While battlefield flashbacks offered stirring reflections from the 1860s, another conflict at the same time was underway here in the U.S. This skirmish went all the way to Rome and was carried out by American church leaders who boldly defied the Vatican.
When you look back historically, there was no such thing as telephones. There was no such thing as the media operations and communication systems that we have right now. So the question for me often becomes, how much did Rome really know firsthand?
22 years before the first shots were ever fired at Fort Sumter, Pope Gregory XVI penned these words during 1839, saying, quote, "To turn away the faithful from the inhuman slave trade in Negroes and all other men."
What's in the church is in society. What's in society is in the church, whatever church. And it's something that we're always battling.
Compelling signs showcasing the sales of individuals and newspaper accounts of cash rewards for their capture all loudly underscore how the Pope's words didn't resonate with American church decision makers. In his book detailing the life of Patrick Lynch, Charleston, South Carolina's 3rd bishop, Dr. Stephen White points to the fact that American bishops looked the other way, despite orders from Rome.
In order to be accepted and assimilated into Southern society, you could not oppose the institution of slavery, at least publicly.
Publicly is how Martin J. Spalding defended a widely criticized practice that is now illegal.
He grew up with slaves. That was part of his reality.
Spalding opposed President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and served as the Archbishop of Baltimore during the closing years of the Civil War.
He claimed that Catholics were working on gradually emancipating slaves by giving them education and giving them skills.
Bishop Martin J. Spalding's 1863 dissertation on the American Civil War has been analyzed by church scholars. The document delivered to the Vatican refers to liberated slaves as miserable vagabonds, drunkards, and thieves. He also writes, those who are freed and head to the north, almost all, at least their children, become Protestants or else indifferent and infidel.
Being a Catholic is about, one of our basic social teachings is about human dignity. So it's hard to wrap your head around all the darkness of it.
April 1865 brought an end to the 4-year conflict that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives when Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox, Virginia. Clearly, Lincoln's emancipation didn't guarantee equality, even in the eyes of the church. However, freed individuals who built these places of sanctuary refused to let go of their faith. Survivors of the Civil War era were forced to put their spiritual values under a very precise microscope.
You have to ask yourself, why on earth would you want to stay in a church that subjected you to that level of racism?
African Americans kind of understood where they were, but a lot of this was due to the fact they were hunting for a place to land. They were hunting for a place to land so that they could claim themselves as being free, independent people of dignity.
Dignity and the prospect of hope blossomed from the belief of making a life in the new big city. Long before Louisville was defined in part by Churchill Downs and Slugger Bats, commerce along the Ohio River fueled the city's economic engine.
They took the faith with them, exactly. And without any priests, by the way.
Faith went on the journey for thousands of African Americans, searching for a better life through a collective exercise known as the Great Migration.
Many of the early black Catholics in Louisville and Kentucky in general were individuals that made a conscious decision to continue the faith of their former owners.
I see how so many were martyred, but these people, they were martyrs.
Thank you so very much, Trenton, for working with me with that.
You are welcome.
I hope that provided, for those who have never seen this documentary, a little bit of insight. The man that just finished speaking, Mr. Bill Hardin, his roots, his granddaddy and his great-grandfather helped to build St. Joe's Proto-Cathedral. And not only did they help build it, they made bricks for that. His brother heard God calling his name, and he wanted to become a priest. But during those days, our archdiocese, as well as many across the US, were not open to receiving African Americans as vocation possibilities. And so his brother would find himself, Father Boniface Hardin, going to St. Meinrad and becoming a monk. But what I really hope that you took from the little bit that you saw was that since the very early days of the Catholic Church in central Kentucky, Blacks have been a part. Black Catholics are not new to the church. Well, you know, they've been with the church in America since its conception. And one of the things that we have not done very well is to send the message that they are not newcomers. They have been a part of this church, building, living their stewardship, and passing on their faith from one generation to the next. Many times you hear people saying, if I left the church, where would I go? I don't have any other home but here. And they mean that. This is home for them. This is all that they know. And the mindset of many people, when Blacks leave the church, the mindset is that they are going to a Protestant church. But the reality is they're not going to church. When they stop, they stop. They don't find that home that most people think that they're looking for in a Protestant church. And so I want to spend a few minutes talking about the role of music in the Black Catholic experience. Because you know, the enslaved people mimic the behavior of the plantation owners. And while it was not permissible in some cases for them to learn to read, they did learn the Bible. And some of them were taught by the religious orders. God bless you all. And it was because of the desire to make things better. Black Catholics began to find a home, as you heard earlier. But when things were beyond their control, and many times their lived realities were just that, and they had nowhere to go, when their backs were against the wall and they wanted to escape, but they didn't know where to run. When the burdens became so heavy and they had nowhere to turn, they turned to spirituals. Many of you have heard of Negro spirituals. They turned to the spirituals because within the spirituals, they found liberation. And God bless Sister Patricia Haley. I love her, loved her, loved her. Sister Patricia's gift was not music, but she thought it was. And Sister helped the younger generations, like myself, to understand the role that music played in the lives of the early enslaved people, particularly those who were Catholic. And so many times the songs carried double meanings for those who were enslaved. For those who were trying to escape, there were songs like Wade in the Water. For those who were didn't know exactly where to turn, they would hear songs like Trouble Don't Last Always. And this particular song by Charlotte Jenkins, Sister Patricia Haley used to sing all the time. which is a Negro spiritual called Balm in Gilead. And I fully did not grasp the true meaning of that until I began to mature in age. And then I understood. And so songs for the enslaved people and songs today provide a sense of hope. Not only does it provide a sense of hope, it lightens the burden. So it's almost like let my people go. I don't sing. I'm not going to try to do that. God didn't give me all gifts. He just gave me a few. But there's a song, go down Moses' way down in Pharaoh's land, in Egypt's land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. When Black people were singing that, they weren't talking about what most people thought. They were talking about the conditions that they were a part of. And give me a clean heart, because they understood that their hearts had to be right in order for them to be right with God. And today you hear songs like Don't Do It Without Me. And it's a song that's laced and wanting to be a part of what God is doing in the world today. And you hear African Americans singing, if you're going to be healing down here, don't do it without me. Don't do it without me. And then you hear songs that they sang during a period of over 100 years ago. I woke up this morning with my mind staying on Jesus, because that was the mindset. Jesus was, in fact, going to liberate them. And Jesus today, when things get really, really stressful, you hear in the Black church experience, and they got it from their ancestors. Take it to Jesus. He'll fix it. He'll fix it, or he'll take care of it. And then there's a song that many of us know, we sing it. Taste and see. Taste and see. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song. Many times when you sing that in the Black church experience, you will look around and see the tears flowing from the eyes, because they connect that with the total experience of their people. So music, the spirituals, gospel music, all served a purpose. All served a purpose. It's almost like when we get new priests in the African American parishes, the first Sunday, the second Sunday, particularly if they're not African American, they come in and the sermon is real short. The homily is very short, and people are looking around trying to figure out what's going on. And then, so that means that the minister of music must engage in taking the word and bringing the word to life. And doing so, a simple song that you can sing straight through in a matter of minutes might be 15 minutes, could be 20, depending on the spirit that is flowing. And so, grounded in their understanding of the Bible, the enslaved Africans employed a unique interpretation of God, Jesus, and our human worth. Church is serious, serious for Black Catholics. Many times there's only one mass. They bring all of their burdens to that one mass so that when they leave, that their burden would be lifted. Today, it's the same identical thing. And even our young, we teach them, remember, when the times get rough and you see no way out, take it to the Lord in prayer. Take it to the Lord in prayer. We last evening watched Driving While Black. I had to stop. I couldn't watch it any longer because I became fearful of what could happen to my grandchildren. And even more so, my husband, when he goes out to the store at night. And I heard myself saying, Lord, I know you see this. I know you see this. Well, back in the time of the enslavement, they too had the same experiences. They didn't have cars, but they too worried about their young. They too worried about their young. I pray that we will bring some solution or solutions to address the experiences that are leaving many people who look like me in fear. When we talk of Jesus as the liberator during the time of the enslavement period, and today, we're talking about embracing the vision of God as the deliverer of the oppressed. And Jesus is viewed not only as a suffering servant, a friend, but one who understands oppression, but also as a conquering king who, through the power of his resurrection, could overcome even the most oppressive structure or structures. I do believe that based on what I've read in several books, our enslaved Black Catholics were focused. They wanted their freedoms just like we want freedoms today. They wanted a better life for those around them, just like we want today. I say many times that God bless their gentle hearts. Had it not been for their belief in God, I'm not too sure what would have happened during the period of the enslavement. We could have had more than one occasion of civil wars on this soil. It is important that we don't forget that in spite of the fact that our enslaved people, our ancestors, were denied the freedom afforded to all human beings, they never gave up. They never gave up. They were there being a sacristan when perhaps they couldn't even spell the word. They were there being a nanny. They were there taking care of the livestock. They were there. They were there. They were there when they knew that they had no value to the plantation owner other than for profit. They were there. Even today, Our young will ask the question, why do you stay in a church that doesn't feed you? That's where they're wrong. The church feeds us. The reason why I walked those 20 blocks to be catechized, the reason why I fell in love with the little green book that apparently had another color back in the day, the reason why even today, after 49 years, I still take classes is because our faith is rich and it still offers opportunities for learning, even today. And I say to you, as others have said, and I've said it to my oldest grandchild just recently, I said, you've got to find a home. You have to. And her question was, why? I said, because you've got to belong somewhere. You have to give something back to God through your stewardship. That's what it means to be a part of this Catholic family. We have to live our stewardship. They lived their stewardship when they were enslaved. And we are called to live our stewardship today. We are called to continue walking in their shoes. No, the church isn't perfect. No, it isn't. And it will never be perfect. Because we are the church, human beings. We can make the church better than it is. But the church will never be perfect. You have imperfect beings that will define what the church is. But we do have to try to meet the needs of the people. It's imperative from where I sit and what I do. When Steve Krupp came to me, we must have spent 4 hours just talking about one subject. And he said to me, well, why do you stay in the church? I says, well, I really don't have any ancestors that were cradle Catholic, but I claim them all. I claim them all. I never really actually knew any religious until I met the Sisters of Charities. But I speak of coming from that community. I never attended a Catholic school in my life. But when I finished college, I gave 12 years teaching in a Catholic school. I want to make our faith better. I want to do my part, as Marilyn King said, to leave something so that our children will have an opportunity to pass on a living faith to their children. Next week, our only grandson is going to be reading. And we're excited. I mean, he's 13 and he was a server and I'm excited. And of course, we got some pushback initially from him. And I said, oh, no, you have to. This is your responsibility. This is your way of giving back. Your dad used to do this, and your auntie did it, your granddaddy, and I've done it. Now it's your turn to give back. And I'm excited about that, very excited, because again, he's going to live out his faith through being a lector. And our granddaughter, She's a liturgical dancer for the church. Now, every grandparent will say that their grandchild is the best, but I gotta tell you, she's pretty good. She is pretty good. And she breaks the word open through her sacred movement. And I can watch her for hours as she shares the word through movement. We have to connect the points for the young as those who were enslaved connect the points for their children, and their children connected the points. Walking in the shoes of another can be a challenge. Sometimes those shoes will hurt. Could be that they're too small because you know it all. Get it? You know, when you know everything, people can't tell you anything. And you make mistakes that you wouldn't make if you would only listen. Could be that the shoes are too large, but you put them on anyway. And they tend to actually fall off your feet. And after a while, you just stop putting them on. But we have to learn to put the right shoes on, meaning you can't do everything. You can't walk in everybody's shoes. You have to zero in to focus in on where you want to place your attention. Right now in our church, and it's been around now for a couple of years, it's called Open Wide Our Hearts. And in our archdiocese, we've talked about it. We've done a little bit with it. And I know I could not get the Black community charged up about it. And I certainly worked with several other multicultural communities, and they weren't buying it. But after Breonna Taylor's death and George Floyd's death and the death of Jamie King, things changed. People wanted to hear about the change of heart. They wanted to listen. They wanted to learn so that they could act. Because people are looking for opportunities to make things right. Is Open Wide Our Hearts the shoes that you need to put on your feet? I don't know. Is Moving Toward Oneness program the shoes that you need to put on your feet? I don't know. Only you know what you need to do. But what we do know is that our enslaved brothers and sisters had a sense of focus. One in particularly was, I coined the name, the father of the Black Catholic movement, which came from Bardstown, Kentucky. His name is Daniel Rudd. And had it not been for Daniel Rudd, who was in fact enslaved, and had not been for him, we would not have the Black Catholic movement today. A couple years ago, Louisville took 83 representatives to Indianapolis to the Black Catholic Congress. And when we returned from that Congress, because the focus actually was about evangelization and giving the voice to those without a voice. It was about leadership development. We came back charged with responsibility, much like Daniel Rudd when he first gathered people right after the people were free. He gathered African American people for the first Black Catholic Congress to focus on unemployment, education, racism, and parish life. Today, the last Congress we attended focused on racism, Catholic education, unemployment, parish life, and evangelization. We've not moved away from Daniel Rudd's very first gathering. Had it not been for a Kentuckian across this great country, we would not have a focus for Black Catholics. We have a focus for our Latino brothers and sisters. It's called the Encuentro. We have a focus for our Native Americans, our First Nation. We get that from the Tecowitha Conference. We have a focus for our API, our Asian and Pacific Island people, one for each group. And we have a focus for those who are descendants of the enslaved Black Catholics. So some people will say, with all of this, why do we have so few? I say that it's far larger than what you think. How do I know? Because we have babies being born in our family. And you know what grandparents have done so well? They always get those babies baptized. And those babies grow up. And they make sure they make their first communion. And as they get older, they make sure that they are confirmed. But we do not, just as they did back in the period of the enslavement, we do not write, we do not fill out forms, and we do not have an accurate count. So I was really, really surprised that Steve Crump was able to gather up the number that he did, 20,000 African American Catholics in this archdiocese. And you say, well, we don't see them. Where are they? They're here. They are here. You see them Mother's Day. You see them on Easter. You see them at midnight mass. They are here. But we have to give them something to hang on to. We have to give them hope. Because where we are right now, we're at a crossroad. We have an awful lot of things that are going on in our local community. Everything from the social illnesses to, as one person, as we said earlier, and you saw it in the video, a focus on life and human dignity. Someone asked the question at one of the rallies, what do you think that our enslaved Black Catholics would have done had they been here with all of the racial injustice? I said, you know, keep in mind, they didn't move too far away from home. In fact, they didn't go 100 miles because they had to have the proper paperwork to move from one point to the other. I says, but you know, one of the things that we have to do is we have to make sure that we are part of doing the right things. We have to make sure that we are not the silent believers. This summer, Sister Kitty Wilson a group of our young African American Catholics decided they were going to have a walk. We were moving too slow for them. And so they organized a walk. And they started the walk from the steps of the cathedral. I'm going to be open and honest with you. I was surprised. They started to walk from the steps of the cathedral. And they reached out to our Archbishop and asked him to pray with them. And he did. And those young people said, and I quote, "Enough is enough. We need things to be better. We want things to be better. And we're going to lend our voices to make things better." Much like Daniel Rudd, enough is enough. We will gather across this country. Those of us who were descendants of the enslaved, those of us who were enslaved, we will gather together to make anew. We're going to take a break at this point, and we will come back. Trent?
Yeah, thank you, Annette. I just wanted to, if you're at a good stopping place, just to provide 10 or 15 minutes for anyone to ask questions or offer comments. And then we'll pause for a break until Bishop Stowe comes on at 4. But thank you so much for your time and expertise so far. Would anyone like to offer a comment or a question to Annette at this time? Look, yes, Patrick.
Unmute. Hi, Annette.
Hi.
My aunt was a sister of Charity of Nazareth for many decades, and I'm carrying on in her tradition, I hope. This question is sort of like the one I had for Dr. Flipper, and that is, I'm fascinated with the attitudes, opinions, and beliefs of the great middle class in whatever section of town they live in. And sometimes I've noticed from my neighbors a shocking amount of lack of enlightenment. And, I wonder how you think that people can grow and have experiences of other people and maybe grow out of their narrowness. What have you seen that works over the years to increase a person's experience, to broaden their perspective?
Okay. I want to look at it from a couple of things. Of course, what we do in the office, but I want to share a little story with you. You know, my husband's a permanent deacon, and sometimes he's invited to other churches to speak. And this particular weekend, we were asked to come to the rural community, and I was really excited for a couple of reasons. I mean, they have the best food in the world, but we showed up for Mass on a Saturday in a church that normally would be predominantly African American, but apparently on Saturdays, the church, the parish, as the deacon said, on Saturdays our parish is white, on Sundays it's black. Well, I was still excited. I wanted to be there, and we sat down front, the second seat, because you know Catholics don't do the front seat, but we sat the second seat, and it was, and because we were going to get up and speak, and it seemed only logical you would, you know, position yourself there. We received communion first. Now we're not talking about 10 years ago. We're talking relatively, you know, not too long ago. We received communion first, and I noticed, I looked at my husband, I said, "Do you see what I see? No one is drinking from the cup." And the more I noticed that, honestly, the sadder I became. And so on the way home, and it takes a lot to trigger my emotions, but I was really upset. Not for reasons that people would think. I was upset because I said, what would happen to them tonight if their life ended and they had an opportunity to receive the body and blood of Christ? And because of my color, they decided not to. I was very upset about that. And so I wanted to say, oh, well, that's the rural community. That's how they act. That's what I wanted to tell myself. We live in the eastern part of, we live in Middletown, and went to church with our grandchild because we want to expose them to, well, really, this is your parish here, but your granddad is assigned downtown, so we go there. And she was so excited about being in this church because the little girls in the neighborhood were her friends. When it came time for the rite of peace, I've witnessed this more times. I'm telling you, it's amazing. I'm getting ready to shake someone's hand. They will deliberately cough in their hand to keep from giving me the sign of peace. And we turn another way and people will turn away. And I'm like, this is too much. This is too much. So we take the posture of forcing ourselves to move beyond the box. That will work for me. It doesn't work for the other person. And then we look at this summer and everything that happened. People they were unaware how to unpack those experiences because the average person thought that we actually had moved beyond those types of situations. And so what we do across the country, what we've done here in Louisville, what I've done with the interfaith community, there are several programs that people, if they want to engage in long-term, because in order for us to be truly brothers and sisters, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves. We're going to have to go to work. And we're going to really change some hearts. We got to change some minds. And that will come from conversations. We've got to have the conversations. But we have to be true to ourselves. We have to look around and ask ourselves, well, who isn't here? And why aren't they here? But what does that mean for me? What am I called to do differently? And so it's an uncomfortable position to be in, but a book is not going to give us a solution. We can read books. I can give you 10 books right now to tell you can read, but it will be through building relationships that we're going to be able to change the heart and the mind. So I encourage people to, all of us, I'm really a tall person, like all 4 feet 11. And I work real hard to build relationships. This is going to sound crazy, but when I walk into the room, the first thing I look for, it isn't necessarily someone that looks like me, it's someone that I can look eye to eye with, I'm looking for some common threads. I'm looking for opportunities to be on equal footing. And so my suggestion is that if you have friends that look like me, take time and talk with them. More importantly, listen to them. Because we can live out here in this nice neighborhood, but I gotta tell you, it doesn't mean that the people talk to us. They have parties, We're not invited, but they're not mean, and they're good Catholic people, and they know us because we're pretty well known, but they don't invite us. So we decided, well, honey, let's do it. Let's have something, invite them. That sounds normal, wouldn't it? I mean, you invite people. We invited and not one person came. Not one person. But God has a way of working things out because we're raising our grandson, and children will break down all kinds of walls. And so the person who really had a problem with us, now he drives our grandson to school because of his son, and we pick up his son and our grandson after school. So we're forming some friendships, but it's going to be through relationships. It really is. It's going to be through relational, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you here in Louisville?
Me?
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Well, the reason why I asked that question, and I'll get some information to Trenton, but we're offering several programs, and we have a really neat little resource that we're going to make sure you have, if you don't already have, that can give you some, present some opportunities that you can use.
Yes, any resources that you want to send me after this, I'd be glad to forward on to all that are registered for the retreat, and they can send them on to anyone who they think might be interested too. So
great.
Do that.
Oh yes.
And thank you too for the example and your own story of living in Middletown and the sense of what you went through. Those are always powerful to me. When people tell of their own hurt and their own stories, a slightly different twist. I remember hearing a talk on YouTube by Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and she didn't use the word discrimination. She used the word rejection. The sting of rejection and the constant rejection. But that idea of how to touch people just fascinates me because it is all around us. And it sure came home after this summer, and the Black Lives Matter, all these white folks around here, don't all lives matter? They just don't understand.
Right. Right.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we probably need to bring this session to an end, unfortunately. Do we have any last questions, comments? Just looking for hands.
I have a comment. Oh, go ahead, Connie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I got an email yesterday about the PBS series about the Black church that Annette, you're probably familiar with. And if you all haven't seen it, you can Google it, the Black church, the PBS series. It's like a 4-hour series. And so much of what was in the film that you shared, while this series isn't predominantly Catholic, it is about how the Black community, how the slaves were discriminated against, and how hard they had to work to bring their religion to life. So I just wanted to add that because your movie and what you've had to say brought that email that I got yesterday about that series to mind.
Oh, great. And I would tell you too, if you have some time, between now and next week, look at KET, Kentucky Educational Channel, at Driving While Black. It is phenomenal. I've got to go back and see that again because there's some real, I have to do some things to prepare my grandson. But more importantly, I've got to do some things to prepare myself. So look at that. And then Trenton, I have one little thing I'd like to close out with from Amanda Gorman, who is Catholic. who spoke at the inauguration, if that's possible.
Oh, yes. Did you want me to pull up the?
No, I have it.
Oh, wonderful. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I
Please.
have it right here.
Great.
You know, so many times, as a church now, one of the criticisms that we are hearing is that we've been too quiet. And I always say to people, well, if the church represents the people and you're one of the people, you have to ask yourself, what do you need to do to make a difference? And so Sister Patricia Haley wanted very much to invite African-American ladies, women, to become sisters, but she was very clear on, if you're not willing to challenge us to be the best SCNs, stay where you are, because we don't need any silent believers. And I will say the words of the Congressman late John Lewis, famous words: if you see something that isn't right, something that is not fair, not just, you must speak up. You need to say something. You have to do something. We have to become beacons of light and hope for those who are forced to live in darkness because of racial injustice, sexism, classism, poverty. Let's be the light for those who Catholic social teachings regarding life and human dignity fails to include them. Amanda Gorman, a Catholic in the Archdiocese of LA, said these words, and I was really taken by them. For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Let's allow Amanda's words to guide us to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annette. I really appreciate that you are willing to join us for this to offer this presentation to us. I think it will be very informative and practical for all those that were attended. And so just wanted to thank you again for that.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome. And then, like I said, any resources that Annette sends me after the session, I'll make sure that everyone here gets a hold of. And then just as a short piece of business, we just have just under about 50 minutes until our final session of the day with Bishop Stowe. So I hope that you all have a chance to take a bit of a break, and then we will be back shortly. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.